Welcome back to the channel, and it's not often that we get to do this, but we're only going to focus on one seller, and that is AFA/CIB for some recent auctions. Some loose graded, but mainly mint on card gems that sold, some pre-production items, and all of these items ended last night as of the making of this video. So welcome again to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader. Some pretty incredible prices and some pretty incredible items that I wanted to go through that AFA/CIB sold. And one quick thing is that I think I get a lot of comments saying, how can you trust a grading company that but not only grades the item, but also lists for sale the item? And I will say that these are consignments that people send the stuff in to AFA/CIB to then be graded and then sold. And I don't know how AFA is compensated for handling the sale, whether they not only charge for the grading, but then also charge for the sale. So there is a little bit of ethical questions as it relates to that. And, you know, Hakes and AFA/CIB are underneath the same umbrella, right? The company that owns Hakes also owns AFA. And I think you'll find more of that. You know, I talked about this in a video a while back about how it's horizontal integration, right? That the grading companies are being purchased by companies that then also own the auction houses or also own the authentication for autographs. And you're starting to see more and more of that. CGC was obviously purchased by Blackstone, and then CGC just recently purchased James Spence Authentication, I believe, to handle autograph authentication. So it's a kind of an interesting time in the graded collectibles industry. And, you know, it does raise ethical questions. I admit that. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a tangent before we dig in. But let's start off with the loose graded figures that sold at auction. First is an AFA 80 Lily Letty Made in Mexico Darth Vader. That one sold for $167.50. Brand new case style. That's probably about right. And whether the grade was because of something wrong with the action figure or if it was the stress lines on the thick tip saber. You can see some very white stress lines there at the base near the hilt. So I don't know whether that caused the lower grade or if it was something structurally wrong with the figure. Who knows? But I wanted to at least show that figure. And one other kind of interesting loose graded figure before we talk about the yak face that sold. This is a Spanish PvP Hoth Stormtrooper, graded AFA 80, and this one is labeled as such by AFA. Again, I don't know why they necessarily go through all this rigmarole and say Kenner/PvP. In my opinion, it should just say 1983 PvP Star Wars. Just like they do with Lily Letty's. They say 1984 or whatever, Lily Letty Star Wars. So I don't know why they say Kenner/PvP other than maybe because they are the same molds used in the Hong Kong factory that are then scarred out for the PvP factory. Maybe that's why they do it. Who knows? But that one did sell for $139.50, which I thought was a pretty good deal for a Spanish figure. Not necessarily a hard to find one, but for, you know, $140, that's not a bad deal at all. It certainly presents a lot nicer than an 80, in my opinion. Next up here is the yak face, and I think I had this one in my what to buy video last week or 2 weeks ago by the time this video airs. But this is an AFA 85 Plus yak face. This one actually sold for a lot less than I expected. So I was a little surprised that it only sold at $860. Again, only, but you know, we've had some AFA 85s that have sold for really big money for yak face, and this is an 85 Plus that sold for largely about the same price that an 85 has been going for consistently lately. So maybe a little bit of a surprise, and maybe it's because this is fairly common, and some of the other items that we're going to be talking about here later are significantly more difficult to find in high grade. And again, that's kind of the strategy that you can use for a lot of these auctions where a seller has a lot of items for sale, and one of the more common items might slip underneath the radar for some people who are focused on the big boy items, and they get progressively crazier as we go through these. So Here is a 20 back A Jawa AFA 75. Again, a fairly common item. I was a little surprised it went even as high as it did, 80, 75, 85 for an overall 75 grade, but it was an unpunched example, no price sticker, clear blister, 692. It's probably about right, really, but you know, an AFA 85 would probably set you back $900 to $1,000 pretty easily, if not significantly higher than that, given that it was unpunched, no price sticker. Next up was an R5D4. I thought this one actually sold for about right. We just saw one that sold that was an AFA 80 plus on Hakes that went for like $1,400 or $1,500, whatever the number was. But this was a 75 plus grade, so a little bit lower grade. But again, unpunched, no price sticker for $865. I thought that was actually pretty fair given the lower grade relative to the one we just saw that sold at the Hakes auction session. Now we're going to talk about a big boy item. This is, again, one I had in the What to Buy video. This was an archival case, but it did have a yellowed blister, graded 85 plus. And this one is a pre-production sample of the die-cast Vader's TIE Fighter, small wings. So this one is one that had smaller wings, I guess, than the final retail release. And it was also a mock-up where it was placed on a TIE Fighter, standard TIE Fighter card back, but it's the Darth Vader TIE Fighter. So it had a lot going on with it, right? It had a smaller actual mold to the figure, pre-production sample with smaller wings, and it was also mocked up on a TIE Fighter 12 back card back. So you knew it was going to go for a lot of money. I had no idea what the value was on this. Absolutely no idea. And it sold in an auction for $4,078. So pretty incredible final sales price, but it is also a pretty rare item with kind of the double punch of a smaller non-retail release version of the actual item, the die-cast Darth Vader's TIE, also mocked up on a TIE Fighter card back. So it's a double whammy, so to speak. Amazing item. Here is I think I skipped one, or I had them out of order, but let's see. Yeah, I think we're going to come back. If I didn't include it, I'll try to remember to talk about it at the end. But here is the Shelf Talker for Toy Galaxy. This is from 1978. And again, they put these on shelves at retail to kind of get people's attention as they're walking by the aisles. So this is the Shelf Talker display, Toy Galaxy, graded 75 plus. Here's the back of it. But essentially, they were just kind of glued on to or slid onto the shelf. And that one sold for about $900. Here is some 12-inch items that sold. This was the AFA 80 12-inch version of C-3PO, mint in sealed box. Pretty good price on that one, $782. I would argue it's maybe a little overgraded, given the creases to the actual box window there. But $782 took that home. And then here was Princess Leia. Again, I think you could argue this one was overgraded, given the fairly pronounced crease in the upper left-hand corner for this box. And the grading was 80, 85, 85. So I could see getting the 85, but I would think that given that fairly pronounced crease that it would lower it down to an 80 plus. Just my opinion on it. But who really cares? I mean, it's not really the end of the world. Who cares? It sold for $1,053, which is actually quite a bit less than what I was expecting. I was expecting that one to go for probably closer to $1,500 to $1,600. So I think maybe the market understood that it could be considered slightly overgraded, and that's why it sold for maybe, I would argue, $500 to $600 less than what a true AFA 85 12-inch Leia would sell for. That would be my guess. But again, you're talking to somebody that knows nothing about the 12-inch line. I don't collect it. Here is that die cast that I put out of order. I meant to put it with the pre-production sample, but this is an AFA 80 clear blister die cast Slave 1, card 75, blister 85, vehicle 80. And it did have a fairly noticeable crease in the upper right-hand corner, or towards the middle, I guess, of the front of the card back. Punched example with a price sticker. That one sold for $11.85. And I think during the What to Buy video, I said I would guess $800 to $900 max. But I wouldn't be surprised if someone wanted to pay $1,200 for that, just given that it was a clear blister. So I think that that's what happened. I mean, it sold for $11.85, which was at the upper end of my exaggerated price range, but just because I don't know what it would sell for really. But given that it was clear blister and was graded fairly high, I thought, it was at the upper end of what I would be willing to pay for it. But, I think if I had been in the market for one, I could understand paying that price for it. Next up, here is a big one, and I'm shocked by this sales price, okay? And I don't know what to make of it other than because of the uncirculated designation. It was an uncirculated 80 Slave One mint sealed box that sold for $4,851. And I'm going to include it in my next What to Buy video, which that video will air before this one does. But right now, there's an AFA 80. Now, it doesn't have the uncirculated designation, but there's an AFA 80 Slave One listed for, I think, by LJ's Card Shop for like $3,200 or $3,300. Yet, we have an uncirculated 80 that sold for, let's call it $1,600 more. And again, I know that an uncirculated designation is very tough to get, mint and sealed box, but that is a pretty crazy price premium relative to the one that's still actively for sale as of the making of this video. And I didn't look it up to make sure it was not qualified versus mint and sealed box, which does make a huge difference. So for the next What to Buy video that I make, that again will air before this video does, I'm certainly going to include it just after what this one sold for. So $48.51, way higher than I was expecting. But again, there are very discerning high-end collectors that are willing to pay a significant premium for an uncirculated designation, especially on an item like this where someone had to have sent in a sealed case of Slave Ones to the grading company. They opened up the Kenner sealed shipper box to grade all of the items inside. So that was a pretty rare item. I would imagine that the population report being recently updated and available from AFA probably played a part in that, because people could look up the certification number for this and see that there's whatever there is, like probably less than 20 of these out there. So again, I don't know that for sure. I'm just kind of speculating, but incredible item. Here was a 41 back survival kit offer for C-3PO. That one sold for $420. This one was an archival case AFA 75 plus. Here was a big one, and I was shocked by this one as well. This was an AFA 85 45 pack debut card for Cloud Car palette. Now, the label shows it as clear blister, and this one was for sale on eBay by the same seller, CIB, in a buy it now situation for, I think, $850. And they took it off and they put it at auction, and then it ends up going for $1,038. Now, I might be misremembering. I tried to look up what it was listed for originally, but I know it was not $1,038. I know that for a fact. It was something like $850, and it was also make an offer, and nobody made an offer, so they listed it at auction, and then it sells for almost $200 more. So, and the other thing I will point out is that it's a yellowed blister, right? It's slightly yellowed there. You can see that at the bottom left, and then also in the top right, I think. Okay, now I don't know that for sure, but obviously the label says clear blister. I think it's faintly yellowed, and mine is faintly yellowed, even more yellowed than this one. And if this one had stayed, $600-700, I would have bid on it and considered it an upgrade versus my example that's AFA 80 plus that is even more yellowed on the blister. But this one, I do believe, is faintly yellowed, and no way I touch anywhere near $1,038. Next up is the Micro Collection Millennium Falcon mint and seal box graded AFA 75 plus. It sold for $1,246. And admittedly, this is one of the rare ones. This one, the TIE Fighter and the Luke X-Wing for this Micro Collection are very tough to find mint and seal box graded like this. But $1,246 is a big number. That is a huge, huge number. Next up is a 65 back B AFA 75 Darth Vader. I just picked up one of these from Rogue 5 Toys, Chris over at Rogue 5 Toys. I would argue that this one looks to be yellowed blister as well. You can see it's starting to yellow there just a little bit. Mine is crystal clear, and I think mine will grade a 75 very easily, if not an 80. And because mine has the same faint crease in the upper corner here, but mine is not nearly as bad as this one. So I picked up mine from Chris for $460. This one sold for $515. So I feel pretty good about mine, just given that mine is a true clear blister, and this one has started to faintly yellow, in my opinion. Next up, we've got a really good deal, I thought. This was an AFA 80 Tri-Logo Biker Scout. That one sold for $405. I thought that was a great deal. I paid about, I want to say I paid about $650 for my AFA 85, and you could make an argument that mine is really closer to an AFA 80. My blister is slightly better than this, only slightly though. But this one got the 80, mine got the 85. And $405 is a great deal. I thought that was a really good pickup, whoever picked that one up. Next up, it was another shocker, and admittedly, it is a PBP card back, the El Retorno del Jedi for Princess Leia, Princess Leia Boushh disguise. But it's got the multi-language name pill, along with the one figura gratis sticker on the front there. Here's the back of the card back. So it's a foreign card back, admittedly, but it was only an AFA 60. I would estimate that it's got a crack to the blister, or it's just got enough rippling that they gave it a 60. But it does have a lot of rippling in the upper left, or really over across the entire top of the card back, but hopefully it doesn't have any cracks to the blister. Another faint crease there, and it is unpunched too, which is a nice feature. $17.75 though, big number. I was expecting kind of $1,000. That was kind of my expectation on this. So again, I had nothing to base that on. I was just guessing. You don't see PBP items come up very often at auction. But that was a stunner. But I think because it is a PBP card back, because it's for a fairly popular character like Boushh, that somebody was willing to pay up for it. So amazing item. I don't know if I'd pay $17.75 for it, but a pretty incredible item. Next up was an AFA 85 Barada. Very high grade, no price sticker, unpunched. And again, it was AFA 85, 80, 85, 85, yellowed blister, but only faintly. Very nice example. That one sold for $662. I was estimating $650 on that one, so that was kind of right in line for me. And then finally, we had the first shot unpainted prototype for the never released Ewoks version of Chief Chirpa. And as I talked about in my What to Buy video, there were two other examples I found on Hakes that sold, both of them around $4,000 to $4,500. This one sold for $3,900, so right in line with those sales. After you factor in, sales tax, at least for me, it would have been like closer to $4,200. So right in line with those sales. AFA 85 archival case, unpainted with a prototype staff as well. So incredible item there, and no shocker on that final sales price, even though it stayed fairly low up until the very end of the auction. But whoever bought that at $3,900, feel pretty good about it, because I did find two other examples that sold at Hakes right in line with those prices. So beautiful item, beautiful items, really, plural. It was just an incredible auction from CIB/AFA, and I hope that some of you were able to pick up some of these gems. Thanks as always for watching my stupid videos, and I'll be back soon.